Hello and welcome on a gloriously sunny day here in the UK. And I'm delighted to have your company for another episode of Adventures of the Awakening Heart. And like many of these videos, this interview is going to be a prelude to an live online event that we're holding on May the 22nd, 2025. And in that event, we'll be having our guest speaker, who is Jeremy Jones, and he will be talking to us about the incredible nature of water and its relationship to the heart. So if you're watching this video today, at least a couple of months after the 22nd of May, then you'll find the recording for the event on our YouTube page. Now, water is of great relevance to the heart. Both act as agents of communication in our world, and both carry a message of connection. We'll get into some of that later, and especially during the event. But first, let me begin by introducing you to Jeremy. Jeremy has a long-held interest in the energetic nature of our world, and seeing the many ways in which the intelligent energies throughout nature have been dismissed and undermined. He's passionate about teaching others how we can foster and enhance natural resonance and coherence in the energies of our living environment, our water, and our food. Jeremy began his journey into the world of healing energies a number of decades ago with studies in several Eastern healing principles: Tai Chi, Qigong, macrobiotics, and Shiatsu. More recently, he trained at the renowned Dr. Ibrahim Karim's School of Biogeometry, biogeometry being the science that uses shapes, colours, motion, and sound to induce harmony into the subtle energies of our environment. So he trained there, but also for the past 23 years, he's been the senior sales manager for Grander Water, a company whose innovations enable users to create highly coherent, vital water to support health and well-being. Oh my goodness, so much to discuss. Welcome, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to share my story.
It's my pleasure, and it's all of our pleasure. And I want to start, if you'll let me, by asking a bit about your background. So you're obviously very passionate about the energies in our environment and water, as we're going to discover. What is it that got you into this work? What was it that initiated and triggered your interest in this area? And what is it that continues to inspire you to do this work all these years later?
Wow. Okay, so a sort of a whistle-stop tour really of my journey to where I am right now. I'd have to go right back to my childhood, where only through understanding the impact of trauma on the body, as we talked about the nature of trauma, it might seem slight and incidental, but if it's our body is a holographic tape recorder. It records everything. It remembers everything in the tissue, and so because I was suffering from epilepsy in my early teens and I was on anti-epileptic drugs, I was curious to understand why I was having seizures, and only through talking to my acupuncturist did I realize that the excess liver wind is what causes seizures in the brain from the Chinese perspective. And but why liver wind? Why? So it's to do with rage and imbalance in the liver. And so I kind of was tracing that back further and further and further. Thought, well, where did that anger come from? And I chanced to, because I was looking for every single stone to see what was underneath it. I was looking at my early birth trauma, and I was never breastfed. My mum had mastitis, unfortunately. I was a twin, but then I was also my mum was Jewish, and although not Orthodox Jew, I was circumcised, and I thought nothing of that until I started diving into the trauma of circumcision and the way in which that actually is what they call a core wound, and so and so that unexpressed rage, or that the whole shutdown of the limbic system and the autonomic nervous system. In fact, there was a picture of me being bottle fed by my mum, and my sister looks completely relaxed, and I'm like a sort of wooden doll. And I'm thinking, why is that child my mum's holding like a sort of a board, a completely just rigid? And so it got me thinking, because my wife's a trauma trained cranial sacral osteopath, and in dialing into how the fluid intelligence of our body is able to hold and store memory, I started to see the links, if you like. And so that's a long way of saying that by being aware of this core trauma, I was able to understand its history. But this was the journey it led me on. I mean, isn't it ironic, how the very thing that takes us down, that causes problems, can be our teacher. But of course, at the time, could I realize it? Could I know that was the case? No, I didn't. And it was only after I was at art college doing a film and degree course, and I had a trip to China on the Trans-Siberian Railway. This is after having, in my late teens, experienced grand mal seizures, which are very frightening, and being put on medication, which was making me super depressed. I was rattling across the Siberian tundra, and there happened to be a neurologist on the train, and I said to him, are these pills healing me? And he said, no, they're not. And of course, back then, I had no idea that Western medicine was such a captured narrative, in the sense that the way in which it curates and controls our understanding of science and healing is by design. And so, as nature would have it, or as the divine would have it, I woke up in Beijing to the sound of sort of something going on outside in the early morning, and it was people doing Tai Chi in the streets through the mist. It couldn't have been a more romantic moment of connection. And so I thought, oh my God, there was something being transmitted here that resonated so deeply with my heart, that I swore to myself, when I got back to the UK, I would start studying Tai Chi, because I wanted to know what it was they were feeling. Because there was, seeing these people moving, there was a transmission in what they were doing that was beyond my sort of kind of understanding. And I thought, that looks really lovely. It's very calming, very, very peaceful. What does it feel like to do it? And of course, the only way you can experience it, you can't read about it. You've actually got to
do it.
Put your body. Like everything in life, you've got to do it. You know what I mean? So anyway, I got back to the UK. I found a really beautiful teacher called Tu Bunag, who you can Google him. Lovely man, a Buddhist Tai Chi teacher, and he taught the martial arts, not martial arts aspect of Tai Chi, but with the soft side of it as well. And really, Tai Chi is, another word for it in China is like it's shadow boxing. So you're working with the psyche, you're working at healing through breath and through movement, everything unlike itself that wants to come up through you, whether you're holding anger, resentment, or grief. And so the Tai Chi form is an opportunity to really slow down to the in-breath and the out-breath, and to connect with how you're feeling that day. Like, are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling fearful? And to bear witness to it, and to create some capacity internally, so that we can go through life with that little bit of magical capacity, so that we don't have to react immediately to what happens. And so that was my early work. And sorry, does that answer your question? I'm conscious I can ramble on here.
No. That's great. And so you had those early experiences of realizing the trauma that you'd been through when you were very young, and that opened your eyes to a different approach to medicine. So what then led you into the deep interest in the energies of our environment, water, food? What I'm guessing the Tai Chi and studying the Eastern approaches to medicine sort of took you in that direction. Is that how it worked?
No, absolutely. So when you study Tai Chi, you learn about yin and yang, which is a symbol we've all seen. But we don't really know what it is. It was a kind of a 1960s symbol, hip and groovy and sort of kind of Eastern. But actually, the Tai Chi symbol is a toroidal symbol of energy moving from one place to another. And in the philosophy of Tai Chi, there's this idea of expansion and contraction. So, for instance, in a strike, it's a contraction. It's a punch, and then equally a deflection is like it's a yin movement. It's a receiving and allowing a punch to come in and then taking it and then moving it, like in Aikido. And so it got me thinking, okay, so there are these energetic ways of working physically in a martial art, but can you apply them to things like food? And I thought, well, surely you can apply them to food. And as it happened, back in the early 80s, I found a place called the East West Center, which was basically the kind of the doyen of bringing in an Eastern way of looking at the modality of what they call the 5 elements, which is the healing elements of food. And of course, the healing elements of food, we're in the spring now. So the organ associated with the spring is liver and gallbladder. And the taste of the spring is sour, the sour taste. And then you use that in food. And then, of course, fire, which is midsummer, is heart and small intestine, which is the fire element in Chinese medicine. And the taste associated with that is bitter. And then, of course, as we go to the autumn, the ripening and the richness of all the harvest in the autumn, the pumpkins and the onions, the taste is sweet. And then we move from there, from autumn into early winter, into gathering, or the metal phase, from earth to metal. And the organs associated with metal is the lungs and large intestine. And then from there, and the taste is pungent, so horseradish, ginger. And then from there, it moves into the water phase, which is the kidney and the gallbladder, kidney and bladder rather. And so, and the taste is salty. So with those 5 elements.
And that's deep winter, is that right?
Yes, so that's deep.
4 seasons, the 5th.
Exactly. So there is a 5th season, and that is, but it's the season between the end of August and the end of September or beginning of October, and November is the metal phase. And what's beautiful is when that phase happens, because when people have dysfunction with their organs, you hear people starting to cough. And when you get the first frost, the synovial joint on a branch freezes and the leaf falls away. So it's the action of freezing, which is a metal quality, that causes the metal phase to begin. And of course, when if our lungs are congested, because our lungs are about boundaries, along with our skin as well. So the skin, the intestines, and the lungs are all about boundaries, about where we begin and end. And interestingly enough, there's emotions that go with the organs as well. So for instance, grief is associated, the house of grief, the lungs are the house of grief. And so when we're dysfunctioning in the lungs, we can feel depressed, or we can experience grief. So with this understanding comes a beautiful lyrical way of looking at then bringing food into a coherent state where you're cooking it, you're cutting it, you could be doing a stir fry, which is fiery for the summer, or you could be doing a baked dish for longer cooking for the autumn or the winter. And so we check these things our ancestors knew intuitively, And so this was my journey really to understanding how to apply these skills to my day-to-day life, and I was able to get off my medication as a result of that, and it was extremely liberating. It was wow.
What age were you able to get off those?
I was around about 23.
Right, so still very young.
Yeah.
And that must have been a real powerful sort of experience to be free of those, because I think you told me before we came online that you'd been told by your doctors initially that you'd be on them for life. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so the thing is that the journey of actually walking the talk and having healed myself from a condition, not in any miraculous way, purely through a pragmatic way of understanding the energetic tendencies of food and how to bring them in. Because in our cultural way of doing things right now, we have sugar, we have tropical fruit, we have very yang, we have very meaty food, and we eat from both those extremes. And in the macrobiotic kitchen, what you're doing is you're reducing those extremes to give your body a chance to find a sense of harmonic balance, just energetically. And also one of the kind of golden tickets, if you like, for me was learning how to make a good miso soup. And miso's got wakame in it. It's got miso, which is a fermented soybean paste. It's got ginger. It's got onions and carrots. You can do all sorts of different miso soups. Sorry, but so miso soup, which back in the day our ancestors probably have an equivalent, but nevertheless, the Chinese and the Japanese had developed these foods over many thousands of years. And so our culture in Western Europe is actually quite young compared with those cultures. So they had a deeper understanding about what resources the human body. And we know, of course, that the blood is slightly alkaline. And in the very beautiful lyrical way that macrobiotics talks about the fact that, you know, as land animals, that land animals had to develop a relationship with the fauna and the flora and breathe oxygen, but they brought with them the sea. And so there's this rather lovely lyrical idea that the blood is the sea, and the blood has this nutrient, you know, mineral rich milieu, if you like, that helps resource and heal our organs. And Claude Bernard, who I think was the founder of the bioterrain theory, was it Claude Bernard? Anyway, he basically talks about the relationship between the alkalinity of the blood, saliva, and urine, and that when you have those metrics and they are coherent, they're matched, then you have health. And we know that most cancers and most illnesses happen when the blood is in an acidic state. Yeah. And so little did I know at the time was understanding just how to make a simple dish could help auto-correct the trajectory. You know, I mean, I'm now 67. Some people like say I look quite young for 67.
You do. Yes.
Thank you. But nevertheless, it's a testament to diet. And what is diet in Greek? Dieta means way of life.
Yes, yes.
Hippocrates talked about let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food. So it's like, and do no harm. And the thing is that we've all been through the eye of the needle in the last 5 years and realized that the way we like it or not, the narrative that we are given and the reality of the consequence of that narrative are becoming very dissonant. And there's a massive disconnect between something called our immune system and how we naturally work with helping ourselves, or whether we buy into a curated, scientifically captured narrative that actually hijacks our health. And so I'm all about sovereignty. I'm all about bringing coherence and qualifying things into my life that I know make a difference. Sorry, I'm on my high horse about that, but
no, it's great. But so you'd really learnt about the energies through movement, Tai Chi, Qigong. You'd then moved into learning about the energies through and how we capture those through our food. What then led you into the whole area of water?
Well, during the 90s, because I was a shiatsu therapist for a while, and I got exhausted with it because you're sort of on your knees working with meridians and healing people. And anyway, I had an intuitive realization that I had to stop doing it. And as it happened, a corporate kind of a qualitative market researcher heard about my work in well-being, and he was doing some work with British Airways at the time and wanted to get me involved with bringing well-being distinctions, certainly using diet, as a part of British Airways, what was then called Wellbeing in the Air. And so basically I got involved with him in the early 90s and stayed with him for about 10 years, bringing wellbeing distinctions into business. And one of the things that we as a consultancy were introduced to were call centers, where you have these huge, great call centers where employees are allegedly the ambassadors of that company, and yet they're on short-term contracts. They're in working environments that are appalling. The air quality is bad. You know, your sick building syndrome. Back in the day, the computer screens were all cathode ray tubes. And so I then found, so the air quality was compromised by the fact that, would you believe it, the worst contaminant in office air is dead skin, because it sloughs off people's bodies, gets into the air, hits the back of the cathode ray tube, carbonates, and then it becomes a carbon crystal that when you breathe it in, causes all sorts of oxidative stress in the body and tiredness, and adds to what's called sick building syndrome. So then I was looking at air filters, I was looking at water, I was looking at EMFs, and water. I'd come to sort of the end of my term with this company, and water was one of the things that fascinated me, because I thought, well, we use it every day. I was in a split situation. I had a Brita filter, I got bored with that. I then had a distiller. I got bored with the distiller because I had to clean it out, and the rubbish at the bottom of the distiller was horrific. Then I heard about reverse osmosis, and I thought, oh my God, this is the answer to prayer: pure water, nothing in it apart from just H2O, and you could test it with a meter, and I was happy.
Mm.
So I got involved with the company, and I thought that was the answer. But then I realized, listening to my intuition, I realized there's something wrong with this. Pure water doesn't happen in nature. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't. So I then started delving into water and the provenance of water, and realized there was a huge body of knowledge.
Yes.
Talking about how water has memory, it has structure. And then I started looking at the work of Masaru Emoto, of Gerald Pollack, and started to realize, Claude Vincent. One of the key people was Jacques Beneviste, who was a homeopath, and Luc Montagnier, who did some extraordinary work with water.
Before you go into their story, which is amazing, I want to come to that. I just wondered if we could talk a little bit about, so going a bit further back in history to Victor Schauberger, because if you tell people a little bit about him, I think his story is fascinating, and what he discovered about structured water. And you'll tell us what we mean by structured water. So maybe just tell us a bit about him, because I think that will give a really good...
Absolutely. Well, I'm trying to think where I got a book on my shelf. Victor Schauberger was my first departure into questioning water. And I read a book called Living Energies.
Oh, I've got that book down here. Yeah. Good one. Yes.
And so this book really is, it's a beautiful treatise on many aspects of water, how water behaves in nature, its vortical nature, how, for instance, the heart is not just a pump, that it's a conductor, and that, Schauberger talked about his sort of hydrofluid dynamics analysis of water in the body. The heart, he worked out the resistance of all the arterial and venous returns in the body, and said it's impossible for the heart muscle to pump through that amount of resistance. And so essentially he said there are other pumps in the body. There's the oxygen and carbon dioxide pump in the lungs. There's movement of the lymphatic system. There's the thermal pump of the warm blood going to the periphery and cold blood going into the center of the body, or the other way around. And so also the capillary action, the way that the blood spirals through our veins, and also capillaries, how the very, very fine capillaries actually draw water through. These are all known scientific modalities. And so he was able to say, listen, there are these things going on that systemically don't fit into the reductionist model that the heart is a pump. And so his work was pivotal for me, because it started me on a road of really questioning orthodoxy. I mean, he did this extraordinary experiment where he raised the temperature of water in a river, because he was looking at the way fish could hold their position against a very strong current. And then he realized that it was to do with the temperature of the water. And if it was raised above about 4 degrees, the fish lost their footing in the water, because the thermal temperature of the water has a density, and that density is the density that their architecture is designed to be able to be at complete harmonic resonance with, without having to use any power, because of the density of the water, the way the fish is shaped, the water would naturally just push the fish and keep it in that position.
And he was a forester, wasn't he? And came from a long line of foresters. And I think one of the sort of ways that he was able to really attune to what water is able to teach us was that he immersed himself in a natural environment. He lived, I think, quite isolated in a natural environment. And it seems, from what I understand, that he had quite a strong spiritual connection as well. And it's almost like he was directly communicating with nature and with water. So
absolutely, and he was able to look at there was this extraordinary story. His father was a forester, and he was helping his father, and he won a contract because the land that he was managing was owned by, I don't know, one of the aristocrats or royal family, and they were selling off vast tracts of land because they were gambling it away in casinos. But the result was that the trees would go downstream and be so broken by their journey down these rivers that only a much lower percentage of the trees could be used. So they were having to cut down a higher percentage of trees to yield a usable
You mean
quantity.
they were transporting them?
They were just throwing them in the river and letting
Right,
you
I
carry
see.
them down. And so
Okay.
one of his claims to fame was that he won a contract with the Hydrological Society, much against their sort of upset, to create a logging flume, which is a mini canal that carried the logs individually down this little canal all the way through. And no one thought it would work. And allegedly, the night before he ran it, he tried it with the water, and the logs got stuck.
Right.
And so he didn't know what to do. And the story goes that he was looking at the water, and this water snake went by him in this sort of wavy motion. And then he started thinking about how the snake could move through water, and realized that actually what the water needed was spin. It needed vortical energy to carry the weight of the log around the bends. So what he did was he had woodcutters carve out slats in this sort of canal, this sort of concave shaped canal, so that it would speed the water on the bends, and water would flow out faster, which gave the water more kinetic energy to carry the logs. Anyway, it worked, and he won the contract, and there's a whole story. But I love that. It's one of those books you read on a winter's night, because it's just, and there's beautiful diagrams in it. So his work really got me thinking about water. And of course, Johann Grander, who's also Austrian.
So he's the founder of Granderwater.
Yeah, so he's the founder of Granderwater. I started learning about Granderwater, and I thought, well, okay, well, how do I experience it? And I ended up buying this thing, which is a little energy pen, back in the early, whenever it was, 80s.
Just tell us, Granderwater, what was Johann's ideas on water, and what's the innovations that Grander have come up with, and what are they selling?
So Grander, he basically was put to work by the Nazis during the war. He didn't receive a conventional education. He was a lorry driver all his life. And his father had invented some magnetic rolling pins for arthritic joints. And he'd started playing around with these devices and found that they worked. And so he was fascinated with magnetism, natural magnetism. And he developed a magnetic generator that was designed to produce an electrical field that could power up other devices. So it was kind of like a Nikola Tesla thing of creating a kind of free energy device.
Right.
And he took it to the Austrian Board of Trade, and they unplugged a television, and this is allegedly, and the television carried on working without being plugged into the mains. And so when they found out about this, they said, listen, this device can't see the light of day, it's too controversial. And so Johann Grander wasn't allowed to develop that technology any further. But what was interesting was his cat started drinking the water that was in the magnetic generator, would you believe it? And he thought, hang on a second, there's something, the cats are very fussy drinkers, and they love water when it's like puddle water or natural water. So anyway, he then realized that there was something this generator was doing to water that was making it biologically of interest. Anyway, he developed the generator working with photonic light and implosive forces, and basically the generator was able to amplify the qualities of the water he put into it. And so what he realized was that he'd stumbled upon this extraordinary innovation of a device that could literally amplify the energetic quality of water. And so he then set about looking for a really high quality water that he could use in his device. That's how powerful it was. So he, in the village of Jockberg, which is just south of Kitzbühel, which is famous for its downhill Olympic skiing, there was a disused medieval copper mine. And in this mine, there was a cave, and he sent his son in because the owner of the mine had died. He got the key to the mine. His son went into the mine, got a sample of this water. He had a very expensive microscope. He was researching water, and the water from this mine, it percolates 60 years through the aquifer, the rock, to get to this cave. And he looked at it under a microscope, and it was full of crystals and crosses. And he realized this water was heaven sent. It was a very, very high quality water. And this water, interesting enough, you can still get today. We'll talk about this in a minute, but he bottles it. So that was the basis of his innovation. And so he then developed devices. This is the cross section of a device that you use in a home, for instance, where the information water sits in the cells. And after the water's been filtered, because you've got to get rid of the chlorine and all the mischief, it goes through this device and then changes the structure of the water. It brings that water into a state of biological coherence, and also physically what it does is it enables the calcite saturation point, or the hardness of the water, to self-seed and carry away. So for instance, with heat exchangers, like I got one in my home here from a washing machine that where the engine died. I'm in Hampshire, very, very chalky area. And when you use this technology on a house, your heat exchangers don't get clogged up with limescale. So that was one of the pieces of peer-reviewed science that came out of this work. The other one was, and this was a beautiful study they did with the, they discovered that water has a natural biome, a natural, if you like, probiotic bacteria that works when the water is aerobic. In other words, when it's absorbing oxygen, and it heals the water. And they discovered from an extraordinary case study in Australia, where there was a drought and there was effluent water being pumped into this lake where the fairways for this golf course was. And of course, it smelled horrible and there were flies everywhere. They heard about grounder water. They put these massive great grounder units on and recirculated the water. And within 6 weeks, the water went from anaerobic, non-oxygen state to an aerobic state and was potable, so it was drinkable.
Amazing.
And that's on an Australian radio report, so TV report. So this science, the efficacy of his revitalization has now stood the test of time. It's been used in factories, hotels, schools, food production, and it's now scaled to great measure.
I just wanted to go back to the piece of equipment you showed us there, just so I can really understand. Maybe you can just bring it up again, the blue and the red. So are you saying, because you talked about this amazing water that Johann discovered in the copper mine, did he then use that as a sort of, to then imprint water through this machine, or did he use that as the sort of measure of what perfect water was, and that's what he wanted to create through this machine?
Yeah, so what he did was with a generator that he created, this magnetic resonant generator, it was able to impact the pure water coming from this mountain stream.
Right.
So that the mountain stream water becomes like a resonant tuning fork of itself.
Okay.
So it's like it's a high archetype or a primordial example of what healthy water is. But what his device did before he put it encapsulated into the units is that it amplifies the quality of that already healthy water. Do you see? Okay. And so as a result, the water sits in these cells indefinitely, and it transmits. Right, you have to see it a bit like a tuning fork. A tuning fork never runs out, and so this water essentially is broadcasting a coherent signal of a very, very high coherence, which entrains all water that is less coherent than it. When it goes through and out the other side, it then becomes affected by it.
Okay.
But the thing is that one of the things about this is that although I'm in sales, I don't like selling to people, and so I say to people, don't believe anything I say. It's really about experience.
Yes, and we're going to come in a minute to talk about a way that people can experiment with this themselves. Just before we do, I just wanted to spend a few moments, and we're going to go into some of this in greater depth when you come and do the live online event in a month's time. But just to give people a bit of a foundation, because I mean, we all know water is vital, it's essential for life. But it seems to be that recently there have been some new discoveries around water, and we're finding out that it's actually so much more incredible than we ever imagined. And a lot of that is to do with the fact that water has structure, isn't it? And some of this work has been, I mean, going back to people like Schauberger and also Leonardo da Vinci understood some of this about water and how it travels in spirals, as you said. But it's like this old information is being sort of rediscovered now, and the fact that water has a structure to it. And Gerard Pollack, who has done a lot of work around the fourth phase of water, or structured water, his work is being increasingly recognized. But what do we mean by structured water? Because, you know, we may think of water molecules just randomly moving about, but that isn't how it works in structured water. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So if you imagine water falling from the sky, going through the ground, through the rocks, through the strata, finding its way, coalescing, and then coming out as a spring, or being found in a well or an artesian well, or being drawn from a water aquifer. That water is not rainwater. That water basically has what I call provenance of nature. So when you're in the presence of water cascading down a mountainside, and you cup it and you taste it, it's almost sweet, it's succulent, it's full of the vibration and the emanations of everything that it's been through to get to that place. And so this is the way the divine has designed water, right? And so there's a very different narrative when you take that water and then you force it through pipes over miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. And then you also impregnate it with things like chlorine. And then when it's recycled, like in the Thames Basin, it's going to have estrogen, nitrates, nitrites, and all sorts of other mischief in it. So what happens is that water, those bulk water that comes out of our tap, is a very different quality to the water that our ancestors knew and loved when they had a sacred relationship with wells or healing waters. And so what is the difference? And so there are various different people that have explored that narrative. And one of them you might have heard of, called Masaru Emoto. And he used crystallography, and he froze water. He froze lake water, or he froze tap water. And he was able to see that when you freeze it, the crystallography, the anatomy, the geometry of that water was completely different. So the geometry of the water from the tap, it had no coherence to it. So it had no visible coherence to it. It was shattered and fractured. Whereas water from a lake that had been crystallized, or a mountain spring, was beautifully geometric. So we're getting
like
here
snowflake crystals.
Exactly. And the work of Veda Austin has continued that narrative.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about coherence, we're talking about water that has a geometric coherence that biologically our system can understand. So Gerald Pollack's work dove deeper into looking at water and the way in which nature adapts water to its needs, and distinguished something called EZ water, or exclusion zone water, which is the water that is an example of EZ water would be the water that a plant draws out of the earth through the fine capillaries of its roots, and then draws it up through to the canopy of the trees that we're now all in the presence of in spring. So the quality of that water in a tree is different from the quality of the water in the earth that the tree draws it from. So
a lot of the water in the body is in that structured form, isn't it?
Exactly. So the water in our eyes, the water in our synovial joints, the lymph, all of that, our body has to fight to bring into an alignment. Now, if we're drinking bulk water that has no coherent structure, that hasn't a geometric coherence, our body oftentimes won't even absorb it. So we might drink a lot of water, but we don't actually hydrate with it, and we still feel thirsty. And so this is where we're now in receipt of the horrific reality that we're spending 5.6 billion on bottled water in this country alone, unsustainably using plastic. We're drawing it from aquifers, which are probably depleting natural rivers, which we know they are, and we're dealing with plastic waste. But we're tethered to the idea that that water, as source water, is more healing. As hydrosapiens, of course, we're drawn to the idea of nature in water and its provenance. and what we're unconsciously in receipt of is the fact that why we like that water is because we know it has been impregnated with the emanations of its journey to get to that source. Compared with tap water, which has been pumped miles and miles to get to us, it literally is stressed from pillar to post. Its structure is then, over a period of time, completely flattened. So if you compare tap water, yes, you can let the chlorine gas off, but if you compare tap water with spring water, there's an immediate difference. And so, for instance, tap water is flat. When you put it in your mouth, it's not round, it's not soft. You don't want to drink it, you don't want to swallow it. But a good mineral water, a spring water, a different story. It's like it's something you can quench your thirst with. And so, because water is so fundamental to our health, one of the things we have to get right is having an abundant source of healthy, coherent water. Now,
because that structure throughout the body, sorry to interrupt you there, but just to make this point, it's a way that the body transfers information through the system, isn't it? So having that structure within our bodies it's essential for how our cells and our molecules communicate. So it's incredibly important, isn't it?
It is. And the thing is that the results now are scientifically provable. So, for instance, when you grow plants with structured water, the yields just go through the roof. When you use it in mechanical engineering systems, you don't need to use chemicals. And for instance, in heating water runs completely clean and clear, which has a huge benefit for facilities management doing, communal heating systems where they're using megawatts of power to heat that water. And of course, the infrastructure and the cost of chemicals is huge. So Granda have dedicated what's called a red unit, which can be used in heating systems to reduce chemical spend completely.
Is it right that structured water will naturally, well, it is, isn't it? Because it's the exclusion zone you mentioned, it will naturally push out toxins. Is that correct?
So the thing is that water is a carrier. If that water can permeate the cell membrane and get in and out of the cells because its structure is such that our body understands it, then it can do the heavy lifting. It can get rid of the toxins and it can hydrate. But with bulk water, because it hasn't got any coherence, at a cellular level, at a kind of a geometric level, our body, it can use it, but it has to do a lot to make it workable.
Right.
And so, for instance, they did a test. To restructure it. So, for instance, with chickens, for instance, they've done research. It's a bit gruesome, this bit of research, but they've discovered that with broilers, in other words, chickens that are bred for their meat, you can increase the weight gain with the same amount of food by 30% from them drinking water that works at a cellular level more efficiently.
Yes.
And so if a chicken can put on weight 33% faster through eating the same food, what is it telling you about the cellular regenerative ability of nutrition combined with healthy water? Not that drinking healthy water will make you put on weight 33%, because that could be misconstrued. But the point about it is that that's the study that was done to, for instance, horses, the Lipizzaner horses in Austria, Spanish riding school, they use Granda water and benefit hugely from it. And the skin is better, the vitality of the horses. Anyway, there's many case studies. The bottom line, I think, for people to take out from this is that, I mean, back in the day, I had a distiller. I had as I've already talked about, I had all these different devices that I thought was the answer to my problem, but I didn't have an abundant source of healthy water. And essentially, what we're about is filtering out the quantitative mischief in the tap waters, the chlorine, nitrates, nitrites, estrogen, all of that, and then changing the structure, because the structure is the other half of the coin. It's a qualitative thing.
And you do only have to, sorry to interrupt you, but you do only have to look at animals, like you say. I've got cats and they just are not interested in tap water. And even bottled water, yes, that's better because they're not getting the chlorine, but they will always prefer to go out and find their water that's come from a natural source.
Absolutely. Even a puddle that looks dirty will be tastier than tap water. My dog's the same, you know. absolutely. And so, I think as a species are ironically surrounded by water, but there's not a drop to drink. It's just terrible, terrible situation to be in. And why? Because we've created an infrastructure that hasn't acknowledged this sacred relationship that we have with water, that our ancestors had with water. And so we've got now with the opportunity with Granda's innovation to, if you like, rebirth tap water, repurpose it, and bring it back into alignment, almost it's like in a sacred way. I mean, I call the Granda unit, it's like a sort of a prayer unit. It's praying to the water, literally, energetically, and enabling that water to take on a completely different behavior. And that might sound bizarre, but as we know, part of the purpose of this conversation is to introduce people to this notion that the water I mentioned earlier on that Granda basically took from the mountain, he passed that water through his device. So it's not the same as the water that's in the red sections, but it's a similar nature. So this water has a remarkable quality. This water transmits a coherent field around itself, about 90 centimeters. And so my invitation for your group of your community who are watching this seminar, who are going to join me on the 22nd, is to buy a bottle of this water. It's under 20 quid delivered, and don't drink it, but place a glass of tap water next to it, pour another glass of tap water and have it at least 3 or 4 meters away, and wait half an hour, and then come back and taste the water that's been next to this bottle.
So they're not going to drink the water in the bottle. This is like a resonator. It's something that's giving out
a resonator.
That's
correct.
going to train the energies of the tap water.
It's going to entrain. And so what's you're going to taste the water that's been next to the bottle for half an hour, have a little sip, and then go and taste the water that hasn't been next to the bottle. It's at least 3 meters away, and have a taste. And then you might not notice it. It's quite subtle.
Yes.
But you generally will notice that the water that's been next to this bottle will be softer, it'll be rounder, it will be succulent and thirst quenching, whereas the tap water will taste dry, flat, and uninteresting. But the thing is,
really only half an hour.
Yeah, half an hour. Don't believe me. This is why you've got to. My journey with healing, with learning how to make miso soup, with Tai Chi Shiatsu and Qigong and all these things, it's a lived experience. This is a lived experience. This is an opportunity to remap your relationship with water, to rebuild a positive relationship with water, and acknowledge the fact that we've become habituated and numb to the fact that what we think is water coming out of our taps is healthy water, and it's not. And only when you understand and change its energetic qualities do you realize that actually our water is a far cry from the water of our ancestors, hence our massive bottled water industry. But the other thing you can do with this is you squeeze a lemon into 2 glasses at the same time when you put a glass of water next to it, and put the lemon juice next to it, pure lemon juice, and then wait half an hour. So do the water and lemon juice at the same time. And then if you didn't get the difference in the taste of the water, have a little sip of the lemon that's been next to the bottle first, a little sip, and then go and taste the lemon that hasn't been next to the bottle, right? Make sure you don't put the lemon anywhere near the bottle in the first place, otherwise it'll be revitalized. And that is when the penny will drop, because the difference between the lemon next to the bottle is massive. And if you're so disposed and you're into a little bit of a tipple, you can do it with really bad vodka. Put a little sample of really bad vodka next to this bottle. I'm not encouraging alcoholism.
Yes.
And a little sample of the vodka that hasn't been near it, and then wait half an hour and do a taste test. And what's amazing is you can take a bunch of grapes, take half a bunch, keep it away, put it next to the bottle, and those grapes will taste sweeter. Strawberries taste sweeter. Blueberries taste sweeter. It does something extraordinary to the sugar density in fruit. And so this begins your journey into understanding that the phenomena of revitalization is a distinction. It's a bit like riding a bike with balance. Once you've experienced it, you can't unget balance.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
So once people have done this, I'm guessing they can keep that bottle, and it will continue to revitalize their
indefinitely.
water, they could maybe put it next to a filter jug, or
Yeah. On our website, we sell it with a Biosera filter
okay,
jug.
right, yeah,
So for under 100 quid, you can get both of them
yes,
if you haven't already got a filter jug. And then
yes,
that way you can then drink the water from your filter jug that's been revitalized by the presence of this information
right.
water.
Okay, that's brilliant. And
And
that
I
will
have,
last indefinitely, will it?
yeah, and
Yeah,
apart from you've got to buy new filters, obviously, from the jug. But
yes,
this
but for
water
the
will last indefinitely. One little story before I go: we had a gentleman that had built a well, not a well. He'd built a small pond. It's on my YouTube channel, and he had a flow form by John Wilkes, which he thought was going to revitalize the water. He also
yeah,
had a whole house system for his house for revitalizing the water. But what happened
okay.
was in this sort of a meter square circular pond, meter deep, about a meter wide, it started to get very cloudy, and
Mm,
he was really surprised. You know, I've got my flow form and I'm using the groundwater from the house, but the thing is, because of the outside detritus and all of the biologics in the water was getting cloudy because there was algae growing in there. Anyway, he had this idea. He had a bottle of this in his kitchen that he'd been drinking, and it was about, less than a third full at the bottom.
all
And
right.
he thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to. So down in he's in Forest Row, so he got some pear tree spring water, pear tree well water, and topped up the bottle. So he diluted the information water in here, the original ground blue water, and he tied you can see it's got a little hook on it. He tied some
Yes,
string to it and dropped it into his pond. And
right.
literally 24 hours later, his pond was completely clear.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea about the entrainment of how
Yeah,
powerful this water is at
yes.
reminding water of its natural coherent state.
Mm, mm, mm,
But again, that's on my YouTube channel. But I can send you some
mm.
links so people can have a look at that. And I've also got
Yeah,
some
but
links
we'll definitely put all the links. But that's fantastic. So for under £20, because I think you're giving our viewers a bit of a discount, for under
yeah,
£20, people can get one of those bottles, and then they can entrain all their other water
all
and
their
re
other water, exactly. And
yeah.
some people even sleep next to their bottle of blue water.
Do they?
They
Yeah.
say they sleep well. We know from when we use the water in the heating circuits in underfloor heating systems, it ameliorates what's known as the geopathic stress from the Hartmann lines and the Corrie
Oh,
lines.
right.
I mean, that's a biogeometric discussion which we
Yes.
can dive into later on the 22nd. But
Yes.
so it brings a harmonic frequency with it that's very,
So
very
the whole
interesting.
house. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, we are going to go into more depth on a lot of this at the live event, but before we finish today, we must just touch on this new understanding around water, that coherent, structured water is able to hold messages, has memory, as you mentioned, and we can influence water with our thoughts, which again sounds quite crazy, but tell us a bit about Masaru Emoto's work with thoughts and emotions, and how he captured that and showed how whether we're giving off positive, happy, joyful, loving thoughts and emotions, how that impacted the water compared to anger and more negative thoughts and emotions.
You know, absolutely. Well, he did these extraordinary crystallography photographs of freezing water once it had been subjected to, as you say, different frequencies, which is what they were. So whether it was an image of something violent happening, or whether it was water that had been sworn at, or "I hate you" on a bit of paper written, or water that had been given a prayer, or "I love you" written on it. So he tried all these different things, whether it was actual intending, transmitting to the water verbally, or with a photograph, or with a thought, and he photographed them all. And he came up and started to see these themes of difference in the crystallography. And what he discovered was that actually all the water that had been given dissonant information, whether it was hate, anger, or images of violence, or heavy rock music, or whatever exposed to it, that all of the crystallography displayed a lesser coherence at the geometric level.
Right.
And then when it was photographed and it had been given coherence, like "I love you" written to it, or a prayer, or whatever, And these are all visible things. And so this was a tangible way, an empirical way to see how water can respond very subtly to everything we do. So if you take anything out from this conversation, pour water into a carafe, let the chlorine gas off if you don't have a filter, offer it a prayer, maybe put it in some sunlight, give it some respect, or hold your hands either side of it and have good intent for it. And then draw some water off at the same time, and don't do that, and just see if it tastes different. You'll probably find it tastes different. It's that extraordinary.
This sort of really ties in with the whole idea in many sort of religious traditions of saying grace before a meal. It's not only a moment of reflection and prayer, but it's about creating positive energies in the food that we're about to eat, because food is largely water. And so if we sit there and have a moment to reflect and feel love and gratitude towards our food and how it's being produced, then that will energetically change the quality of that food, increase the coherence, which then brings us benefits for our body. You know, what you just said there is, you know, that this is something we can all do. We can honor our water and our food, and actually change the energetic nature of it for our benefit. Something so easy to do.
I mean, we use this analogy, which is quite pertinent here, which is that if you put a frog into boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in warm water and heat it slowly, it just gets boiled alive. And unfortunately, that's the analogy of where our waters are at the moment. You know, we're surrounding ourselves in line of sight mobile phone masts, AC electric fields in our homes, Wi-Fi, pulse microwave radiation in the Wi-Fi, which is a toxin, Bluetooth, mobile telephony. You know, we'll talk more about this on the 22nd, but you know, electric cooking, induction hobs, microwaves, all of those things fragment the water and the food, making it even more difficult for us to absorb. And so the thing is, we're surrounded by this sea of technology that we think is convenient, but we wonder why we're tired and we're stressed and our body isn't able to recover. And the thing is, getting our water right and then setting everything else right in our environment can start to allow our bodies to find that coherence and start to thrive. And so I am all about really waking people up. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying we shouldn't have these technologies. I mean, you know, we don't have Wi-Fi, but we use Ethernet. But at night time, my wife and I turn off our mains electricity because we sleep so much better. And the thing is that these are the things you've got to do. For instance, you know, don't have coil sprung mattresses because they've got springs in them which have a magnetic charge which can affect our bodies. So we have to look into everything. We have to look into our cleaning products. We have to look into what we're using on our bodies. All of these things are either elevating us or they're pulling us. And so now, unfortunately, because of the nature of commerce and the nature of, you know, the power of advertising, unless we get really ill, we don't pay attention. We've gone to sleep at the wheel. So I am all about waking up into this new paradigm of awareness to create the coherence that our bodies need to thrive. You know, and you know, we're at an extinction state in our civilization. You know, we're injecting ourselves with mRNA vaccines. We know nothing about how that's going to affect the next generation. We know that it terminates pregnancies. We know that you know, we are surrounded by a kind of this silent weapons for silent wars narrative. We're being taken down. There's chemtrails. I mean, all the rabbit holes that we could go down in this conversation. But the reality is that we are responsible for what we put in our mouth and the environment we live in. And so water for me is a foundational place to begin. I've spent years researching it and 23 years now working with Granda. And so you've got to address water at the quantitative level, the mischief, you've got to get rid of that, you've got to filter it out, and then you've got to address its qualitative state. And that's where the innovation I'm championing now for the last 23 years is so powerful. I mean, it's run by a family in Austria. We go out there once a year. It's a beautiful company, and the stories and I mean, we've got one of the books actually that you might like to put on the link is this book here. It's out of print now. It's called On the Track of Water Secrets. I've got a PDF. I can send it to you. And it's all about people's experiences of this water. And it's got a bit of science in it as well. But this book was written by a guy called Hans Kronberger, who, if anyone remembers Esther Rantzen, she was like a kind of the sort of the police for sham salesmen selling snake oil. Well, Hans Kronberger was head of consumer protection for Austrian television, and he was sent to Johann Grande to take him down, to say, right, what you're selling is rubbish. And yes. Johann Grande basically said, well, read these letters from people and learn for yourself. And so from being a journalist in consumer protection who was there to actually take him down, he then became his greatest proponent. I wrote a book about him. It's a great
story. So just before we finish, and this we will really expand on the 22nd, but the message here really from what you're saying is that water can be imprinted with frequency. It holds that frequency and then it will transmit it to its surroundings. So there are some amazing experiments, aren't there? And maybe you could just quickly tell us about water being able to transmit vibrations of viruses and other things into water at a distance that then impacted on the structure of that water. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, that was when I came, my homeopath shared it with me about 10 years ago. Extraordinary research done by a gentleman called Luc Montagnier, who's sadly no longer with us. And he had been given the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the AIDS virus. And he was looking at, he wanted another project and was looking at the work of Jacques Benaviste, who was a fellow countryman from France. And Jacques Benaviste was basically shut down by the authorities because of his controversial claim that water has memory, which of course is the foundation of homeopathic homeopathic principles. And so Luc Montagnier started experimenting with water and its vibratory qualities, and he isolated the AIDS virus in these special little containers. And by using a mu metal tube, basically he was able to detect the frequency coming from the AIDS virus and measure it and record it as a sound file. He then transmitted that sound file to a lab in Italy, and then they played the sound file back to water that had certain DNA protein building blocks in it. And within 45 minutes, under an electron microscope or whatever microscope they were using, they were able to detect that the AIDS virus had been transmitted as a sound frequency and reproduced itself in this water. And so if that's not proof enough that water receives information, and we're surrounded by electromagnetic information, we're surrounded by so much mischief. So the idea of bringing water back into its sovereignty and alignment for our own biological consumption is really, really important right now. And so Granda's, Granda is one of many other products. I mean, there are lots of ways of doing it out there. This particular one is the most potent one that I've found,
But just for us to take away today, just to be really mindful of the sounds that we're emitting around our water, angry conversations and arguments, or gentle, loving conversations, and the thoughts we're thinking. Everything we're putting out is going to be influencing our water. And we also have to remember that our bodies are largely water. So then, everything we're putting out obviously also impacts on our physical bodies too. I mean, it's quite mind-blowing, really, when you start to think about it.
Well, it's completely mind-blowing. And the fact that you and I came here on the back of the loving embrace of our parents, having that orgasmic moment where the cells of the ovum and the sperm collided to flash point into the embryonic evolution of who we are, is testimony to the fact that water carries so much potency and power with it, and that we are the living embodiment of what was, two invisible microscopic cells coming together to create new life. And we forget all of that happens in water. And they're now realizing that water, if you were to figure out how many terabytes of information water structure holds, it's massive. And so then they're now starting to realize, oh my God, water ain't just H2O. Water is a living, complex system with an immense capacity to hold information, and you and I and life in general is testimony to that, you know. So it's, the chapter hasn't been finished on this. It's an ongoing opening and emerging conversation, you know.
Not at all. No wonder our ancient ancestors worshipped water in the way they did, because they really understood some of this. We've forgotten this, but it's time for us to reawaken and transform our understanding of water, because I know it's going to be an important part of our healing as individuals, healing of the planet. It's so important at this time. Jeremy, we've talked about so much.
I hope not too much.
There's still so much more. We haven't talked about the heart, really, and that's a big part of the story that we're going to be covering. So we'll be
absolutely the
really
helical
getting
heart
into that on the 22nd. And then there's the whole biogeometry side of things, which we've touched on a little bit, but not in great detail. So we'll see if we can talk about that on the 22nd, or you may have to come back another time and do another
No, you're welcome.
But thank you so much for your time. That's been amazing. I want to just remind people again that if they want to get involved in this little experiment that you've set up, this challenge for people, then we'll put the links below the video where they can get hold of one of these bottles, and it's not about opening and drinking the water that's in the bottle. It's about using that to entrain their own water. And I
mean, this is a healing water. Sorry to interrupt you, but when you buy it for the purpose of drinking, normally what you do is you use a lid full and you place that in a liter of water.
Okay.
You can drink it neat, but it's very, very powerful. It's very, very potent. So it increases thirst reflex. So when you drink this neat, you suddenly become very thirsty. Why? Because it goes into the microcapillaries of the body.
Right. Okay.
Deep into and so you absorb it. So you can drink it neat. I mean, I've got a case study. I have macular degeneration in my right eye, and I did a 10-day water fast and started drinking this with my revitalized tap water, and my eye healed by 35%.
Wow.
And they've now got peer-reviewed science that explains that the epithelial cells in the gut lining increase their coherence and biological integrity by 17.4% from drinking revitalized water or the bottled water, so filtered water as well. So it's an extraordinary technology, and I encourage anybody who's interested in intuition is piqued by this to dive in, invest what's less than £20. And start your journey, because I'm so passionate about this, but I'm more passionate about people having access to water they can enjoy. We've forgotten to enjoy water. We have a limited understanding of limited supply of water, and this is a way of liberating you from that. So I have one last thing. I have a client, and I can send you the video to her testimony. I sent her this. She's on UK Health Radio. She's called Joanne. She calls herself the Divine Life Yogini. She's a bit of a character from Essex, an Essex girl. And she basically I sent her the jug and the bottle because I wanted to go on UK Health Radio. She doesn't lug water from the supermarket anymore. She did the taste test with her children, and she could not believe the difference. And so if there's a way, if that video is a help for your listeners, viewers, to go, oh my God, Jeremy is not talking rubbish, this is real, then go for it, because it's about our relationship with water to when we turn our toes up. Do you know what I mean? So we have to rebuild and recreate that relationship to make it
coherent. So many people have lost that relationship in many ways, and many people don't. They say, oh, I don't drink water, I don't like the taste of it, or the taste of nothing. But from what you're saying, just by revitalizing water, you have a whole new experience. And it is the experience. We can read about, and you've mentioned some research, and there's some amazing books out there about water, but it is about experiencing it ourselves. We're not going to understand.
It has to be lived. It has to be lived. We've got to put ourselves in the thing of it. I'll send you a link to the book so people can download the book if they want. I'll send you the video testimonials. I'll send you the link to the website where they can buy the water. I'm really looking forward to the 22nd.
Yes, me too. There's going to be so much to discuss. It's going to be brilliant. And people, if they join us live, they can ask you questions themselves. And
absolutely. It's an ongoing emerging conversation.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's been wonderful.
You're welcome. Take care.
We'll see you again soon. And thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope you'll be able to join us on the 22nd. Take care for now. I look forward to connecting soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.